Mark 6:30 through 44. The apostles returned to Jesus and told him all that they had done and taught. And he said to them, "Come away by yourselves to a desolate place and rest a while." For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. And they went away in the boat to a desolate place by themselves. Now many saw them going and recognized them, and they ran there on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion on them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And he began to teach them many things. And when it grew late, his disciples came to him and said, "This is a desolate place, and the hour is now late. Send them away to go into the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat." But he answered them, "You give them something to eat." And they said to him, "Shall we go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give it to them to eat?" And he said to them, "How many loaves do you have? Go and see." And when they had found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish. Then he commanded them all to sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups by hundreds and by 50s. And taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and said a blessing, and broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples to set before the people. And he divided the 2 fish among them all. And they all ate and were satisfied. And they took up 12 baskets full of broken pieces and of the fish. And those who ate the loaves were 5,000 men. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks, Kristen. 20 years ago, Jonathan Haidt wrote a book called The Happiness Hypothesis. Happiness Hypothesis. And what he's doing in this book is essentially a historical overview of how human beings have thought about happiness and joy over a long stretch of time. And because that is a universal phenomenon to the human experience. All of us have this craving, this drive inside of us. We want to be happy. We want joy. We want meaning and satisfaction. And so he's painting with broad, brushstrokes. But he says, for us in the West, here's how we've gone about trying to answer that question of how can human beings be happy. Essentially, if you could boil it down to one word, the Western answer to the happiness hypothesis, one word, more. Just, I'll be happy if I can get more money, more food, more vacation, more square footage, more power, more tech. Not more tech, the community college, but more technology. But he shows in the book that there's empirical data that shows that there is almost no correlation between wealth and contentment. We think it's there, it's not there. In fact, there's all this data that shows that as a society prospers, it's way more common for depression to prosper as well. A lot more depression. So that's the Western answer. And he says the Eastern answer, and by this he means he's looking at thinkers like Buddha and ancient Chinese sages. The word that if you boil it down, the Eastern answer boiled down into one word. It's the word detach. To detach. In other words, they say do not change your circumstances to get more stuff. That's the Western answer. It's not let's change our circumstances. It's let's change our attitude about our circumstances. That way, if you disconnected from what's happening in the world, then no matter what you get, no matter what you lose, you'll just be kind of zen, just kind of in the middle. What's ironic about that, though, is that a lot of people have found that approach to satisfaction unsatisfying. Because one of the core ingredients of what makes human beings joyful are our relationships. And if you detach from people in the name of happiness, it actually undermines your happiness because your relationships won't thrive as much. Many of you know that for the past several months now, we have just been walking our way slowly through the Gospel of Mark. And in this passage, Jesus gives you his answer to the happiness question. It's not the Western solution, which is just maximize your desires, and it's not the Eastern solution, which is just neutralize your desires. Jesus is going to show us you have to redirect your desires. So let's look at this passage and see what we learn about the quest for human happiness. 3 things that I think we see. Number 1, the prerequisite. Number 2, the illusion. And number 3, the key. So prerequisite, that's verses 30 through 34. The illusion, that's verse 35 through 38. And the key, that's verse 39 through 44. So the prerequisite, let's look at the prerequisite. The story right before this, Jesus has just sent his disciples to go out on a short-term mission trip. And so they go off and they're doing and seeing some really amazing things. I mean, they're casting out demons and they're healing people and they're preaching the gospel and they're seeing people come to faith. Awesome stuff. In our passage, verse 30, they return and they report back to Jesus, here's all the stuff that we just saw. We're totally amped up about it. And we're also really worn out, I'm sure, as part of what they said. Because it says in verse 31 that they've been going and going and going so much, there's no time to even eat. Also, there's just crowds around them still. So Jesus says to them in verse 31, hey, why don't we get in the boat, go on a little private retreat with me. We'll go on a little getaway into a desolate place. Nobody will be there, and we'll just get some R&R and recharge our batteries. And the disciples say, yes. And so they get in this boat, and as they are going, right when they land on the shore, there is an enormous crowd of people waiting for them. No R&R coming. In fact, if you look at verse 44, it says that the size of this crowd was 5,000 men. And because it specifies men, that means that number is not counting women and children. And so scholars all agree this is probably a crowd of about 15 to 20,000 people. The FedEx Forum can hold somewhere between 18 to 19,000 people. So if you remember back when we had a pro basketball team and people went and it was full and it was packed to the gills, that's the size of this crowd that this boat of exhausted disciples are stumbling, just a sea, just a bottomless pit of need, all of these people. And I would imagine, if I were one of the disciples, I would have been so frustrated because you're just like, I just wanted a little me time, a little rest. I just wanted to kind of veg out and sit on the couch and play my stupid, phone game and watch something dumb. I wanted to disconnect from the world, and there are so many people. I didn't want to be needed right now. I just wanted to rest. Look at all these people. Verse 34 describes this crowd as sheep without a shepherd. Now, this is a image that the Bible uses a lot to describe people, that we're like sheep, and it's not really a compliment. Sheep are fairly dumb animals, so I've been told. They're actually fairly smart socially within their system, but they run and follow the person in front of them, the sheep in front of them, into their own danger. In fact, I read this article this past week. It was in 2005. The story took place in the country of Turkey. And in 2005, there were 1,500 sheep that all ran off of a cliff, and 450 of them died. They literally were just like, oh, the person, I keep saying people, the sheep in front of me, the dude in front of me is going this way, I'm just going to fall, and then you just fall off a cliff. They're not smart. In fact, if there's ever a perceived threat or predator in the area, they'll just run and get themselves into trouble. They'll fall into ravines and get stuck, and they need somebody to get them out. You've seen the videos where they get the sheep out, and it just jumps right back in the ravine, and they have no way to defend themselves. They have no claws, no sharp teeth. They're totally vulnerable. They are the epitome of need. That's why they need a shepherd to defend them and protect them and say, hey, the food is over here and death is over here. Don't go that way. Go this way. So when you have a crowd of people, and the Bible describes this crowd as these are like sheep, but no shepherd. Saying these are people that are so helpless. They cannot fix themselves. They cannot protect themselves. They cannot provide for themselves. It is just this group of needy people. Now, you and I have a really complicated relationship with need. A friend of mine, many of you know the name Richie Sessions. Richie Sessions once said this sentence that I've never been able to forget. But he said, need is a sweaty word. It's a great way to put it. Because you know when you run into somebody, you bump into them after they've gone to the gym, or they've just gone for a run, and they're just wet, and the sweat still kind of, the drips are coming off their nose, their shirt's a different color. You don't want to hug that person. You don't want to move towards that person. You're repelled by that person. And we have a complicated relationship with need, because when we experience need within our friends, people are needy or people have needs, for some of us, or even we feel this internally, you want to go and you want to take care of them and you want to meet their needs. But often if the needs become too much, too draining, then you just start to avoid the person. You know, the person that you are friends with who always calls you and just unloads everything on you. You see him call and you're like, I'm going to let that go to voicemail just because it's sweaty. So when we have our own needs, it's easy to think God has a complicated relationship with us too. He's going to react to us in the same way that we react to other people who are needy. It's easy to think, okay, if I show up sweaty, God's going to say, okay, you are wearing me out with this thing. How many times are we going to talk about this? Or you really should be past this by now. It's so frustrating. We're talking about this thing again. You should have been past this by now 5 years ago. Or we think God is just like, he just doesn't care about our little problems. I mean, he's got big, global issues he's trying to think through. So my little issues. But here in the story, you have this crowd. They are so needy, so helpless. They show up unembarrassed. They're just so needy, so sweaty. Jesus, I need you, I need you. How does he respond? Verse 34 says, when he sees the crowd, like sheep without a shepherd, he has compassion on them. He is not frustrated with them. He's not annoyed with them. He's not exacerbated with them. He is moved with compassion towards them, and he becomes the shepherd that they need. He teaches them. We're going to see he feeds them. He's leading them. He is their shepherd. So the prerequisite to human happiness is need. It starts with need. It doesn't start with fullness. It starts with need. And you have to see how Jesus responds to need. It's with compassion. It's never with being worn out. You will never, ever, never have, never will wear Jesus out with your need. So what's the takeaway from point one? Takeaway from point one is bring your need to Jesus. Show up and say, Jesus, I need mercy right now. I need comfort right now. I need reassurance right now. I need friends right now. I need fill in the blank, relief right now. That's what the crowds are really showing us. They just show up sweaty, needy, utterly dependent on Jesus. But that is not what we see with the disciples. And that brings us to the second thing that we got to look at, the illusion of human happiness. And you see that in verse 35 through 38. What do I mean by illusion? Well, if you go back to the story, here's this crowd, and it says that Jesus starts teaching them. And like any preacher, we can get long-winded, and Jesus had some stuff to say. And so Jesus was teaching for a long time, and after a while of teaching this crowd, you see in verse 35, the end of verse 35, the disciples, pull him aside. They kind of interrupt him. They pull him aside. They say, "Dude, you got to land the plane, bro. Like, you gotta wrap this up. People are getting tired. People are getting hungry. We gotta shut this down. Look at what they say in verse 36. Send them away, the crowd, the people, send them away to go into the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat. In other words, people are hungry. Release them to go off into the villages and the countries. That, there's got to be a McDonald's out there somewhere. They'll let them get some food. And Jesus' response is hilarious, I think. Jesus looks at them after this suggestion and he says, you give them something to eat. And they're exacerbated with that response. Look at what they say in verse 37. Shall we go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give it to them to eat? 200 denarii was their currency back then. In our terms, it's basically 8 months worth of paychecks. So they're looking at Jesus and they're saying, you want us to go bankrupt to feed this crowd one meal. That's crazy talk. They're being snarky, they're being sarcastic with him. But Jesus asks them this, okay, what do you have? And so they go to their lunch boxes and they're looking through their stuff and they pull out, they say, we have 5 loaves of bread. Now don't picture Wonder Bread, white bread from the, Kroger. These were barley loaves. These were like the size of biscuits, like Bryant's biscuits. And they say we got 5 biscuits, we got 2 fish. We got 5 biscuits, 2 sardines. And let me ask you this. Do you think Jesus really thought if they looked through their lunch boxes, maybe look real good, check way down there in the bottom of your bag, that they would have enough food to feed all these people? No, I think Jesus is forcing them to do an inventory on their resources, to look at what they got, and they have to look up and verbally say out loud, we don't have enough. We don't have enough for what's in front of us. He is forcing them very gently into a place where they have to come to terms with their own need, where they have to say, what we have is not enough for what's in front of us. And I think here's why. I don't think Jesus is being cruel here. Remember, I told you in the passage right before this, the disciples just came off of this trip that was incredibly successful. And I would imagine it'd be easy coming off of this great high, this great success where you just crushed it, you saw amazing things, to come in and feeling competent, feeling like I can do some things. And you know as well as I do that competent people tend to struggle with compassion on needy people. Needy people are frustrating to competent people because competent people are like, it's not that hard. Just do it like I did it. Like, here's the 3 steps. Here's what I did. Competent people, it's really easy for us to, we give a lot of advice. We talk down to people. Just do this. It's not that hard. And Jesus is very gently disabusing them of this illusion that they are starting to live under of their own self-sufficiency. Some of you might remember March Madness from 2018. College basketball 2018, the tournament. The University of Virginia, where some of you went, was the number 1 seed, one of the number 1 seeds, and they came in, everyone had the expectation that they were going to win the whole thing. They were that good. They go into the first round, they're up against a 16 seed team, UMBC, the University of Maryland at Baltimore County, and lose by 20 points, just get crushed. And in addition, everyone's brackets got crushed. It was just, and they went home with their tail between their legs. It was terrible. Came back the next year, won the whole thing, dominated, won. And there's this amazing video of the team in the locker room after the final championship game where they're celebrating. They're all huddled up together, and they got their arms on each other's shoulders. They're all wearing the championship hats. And the coach is giving them this speech. And one of the things the coach says is, you just experienced something so good, but do this for me. Promise me that you will remain humble and thankful. That's interesting. He is looking at these people that literally, they were so humiliated, and then they rose up and they just shut down all the haters, and he could have said, yes, that's how you do it. That's how you show the world. You prove the world wrong. We did it. We're awesome. He must have had enough life experience to know about the dangers of success. Because he looks at these guys who are at the top, the pinnacle of all of their athletic achievements up to that point in their life, and he says, please, I beg of you, remain humble, remain thankful. That is the posture that Jesus wants us to live in and embody, a posture of humility and thankfulness and utter dependence on Jesus. The crowds are doing that, and some of us relate more with the crowds. We're like, yeah, that is me. I feel needy, sweaty. Jesus, help me, help me, help me. I feel that way all the time. Like I can't get through this day without Jesus helping me. Others of us were more like the disciples, and we relate more to the disciples, where this talk of need feels a little foreign to us. It's hard for us to hook into it and connect with it because we don't feel needy. And I think the reason why is because there's a lot of competent people in the room. A lot of people that have been successful and know how to solve problems, know how to get stuff done, and we have access to amazing resources. So even if you don't know how to get something done, you just Google it or ChatGPT that trash, and it's boom, you got the answer, you got the resources. Or you start to realize, oh my goodness, I forgot to get groceries yesterday. You just fire off a list, and the groceries are waiting for you on the porch when you get home. We have access to all these tools, all these resources. So many of us were, competent problem solvers, action-oriented, and so it can be easy to begin to live under the illusion that I can fix my own problems. I got this. I know how to change a light bulb, so of course I know how to deal with my own anxiety. And we say, well, I know what to do. I'll just listen to a podcast, or I'll just create a new exercise routine, go back to the gym. I'll set up a whole new organizational structure for our house. I'll start journaling. I'll go to the store. I'll buy a nice new journal. I'll start practicing mindfulness with some regularity. None of that stuff is bad. But it shows you in our heart of hearts that our first knee-jerk reaction is, I don't have needs. I just kind of feel like sometimes it would be nice to have a little boost, a little, kind of a little bump up. But Jesus is inviting us, and he's showing us in this passage that the Good Shepherd will stop at nothing to bring us to a point where we have to start coming to terms with our own needs, our lack of self-sufficiency. He's not doing it so that we would despair. He's doing it so that we would be weaned off of our self-dependence, and be brought into Christ's dependence. And just knowing that you're needy is not the answer. It's part of it, it's the prerequisite, but that's not the key. So what's the key? What's the key to human happiness? Well, that brings us to the last thing. Let's look at this last thing. Verse 39 through 44. Jesus, the Good Shepherd, he has everybody sit down in groups on the green grass. He leads us beside, makes us lay down on green pastures. And it says in verse 41, he takes the bread, and he looks up to heaven, and he offers up a blessing, and he breaks the bread, distributes it, gives it to the disciples, and they distribute it. And somehow, miraculously, it doesn't explain how this worked, everybody, this whole, FedEx Forum-sized crowd, everybody ate and weren't just like tided over. It says they were satisfied. That's, verse 42. They were filled. And then verse 43 says there's such an abundance of food, there's leftovers. So Jesus takes 5 Triscuits and feeds a FedEx Forum crowd so much that everyone is stuffed. They're undoing their the belt on their tunics to make room. And everyone gets a doggy bag. That's how much stuff that was done. Now, here's what's interesting. Outside of the resurrection, this is the only miracle that's recorded in all 4 of the gospel accounts, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. This is the only one outside of the resurrection, which shows you this is such a central, important, pivotal story. And the reason is why, here's the reason why, is because it doesn't just show us what Jesus gives, but more importantly, it shows us who Jesus is. Because, the reality is, okay, giving everybody a free meal is pretty amazing. And everyone's going to be hungry in a few hours again. Like, a free meal is nice, but what did it actually do? Jesus is making a deeper claim than just providing a free meal for people. And you actually see this in John's account. When John tells the story, he mentions a detail here that Mark doesn't. Jesus doesn't say, I give you the bread of life. He says, I am the bread of life. He's showing you there's something deeper and symbolic. This is almost like a living parable of me giving you bread. That's me. In other words, what he's doing is he's showing that there's an analogy between your physical hunger and your spiritual hunger. Just as your body physically, maybe even right now, is longing for food, longing to be filled, longing to experience that release of satisfaction. In the same exact way, your soul is longing to be filled, longing to be satisfied, longing to just experience that level of transcendence. And Jesus is showing us through this story, I'm the one that provides that. I'm the key. You turn your hungry soul towards me and feast on me, you will be filled. But here's the question. Why did Jesus, if he says, I'm the bread that fills you, why did he have to break it? You say, oh, well, logistically it had to be broken so that it could be distributed to multiple people. Maybe. But Jesus is making, I think, a deeper point. That Jesus is saying, you will not be filled unless I am first broken. You cannot be filled, you cannot be satisfied until or unless I am broken on the cross. And you say, okay, why would, that's never made sense to me before. Why does Jesus have to die, you may wonder? Why couldn't God just say, you want to be spiritually full and happy? Zzz, you got it. Why the death, the gruesomeness, the blood? Here's why. A lot of people say, I'm a good person, but I'm not really religious. So they say, I try to do the right thing. I follow the golden rule. I tell the truth. I try to love my city. But, God, Jesus, I don't really know what I think about all that. Imagine that you have an older single woman. Let's say she's a widow and she's raising a child. And she's teaching her boy how to live his life. Said, when you grow up, I want you to be the kind of person who tells the truth. I want you to be the kind of person that follows the golden rule and cares for the poor and does the right thing. And she is working hard her whole life to provide for him and to get him good birthday gifts and to send him to schools and just to take care of him. And she's working her fingers to the bone to save up every last penny to send him off to college. And she sends him off to college, and off he goes. And then after he graduates, and he goes in and gets a job, and then he leaves, and he never talks to his mom again. Never thanks her, never texts her, maybe every now and then sends her a Christmas card, but that's it. You and I would look at that story and say, okay, that's a good person, like in terms of, like, let's just say that they actually were following everything that their mom taught them to do. They're following the golden rule, they do the right thing. You look at all this and you say, that's a good person, but it's still not enough because they owe their mom love. And it's wrong that they're not. Like, that's the fact that they have treated their mom like that, we would say is wrong, even if you're following the golden rule. You bring that up to the spiritual level. If there is a God, that means that God has taken care of and sustained us our entire life. Every breath that you have ever breathed is a gift that God has given you. He has given you this enormous abundance of gifts that you and I enjoy every single day. And so, to not supremely love God for everything that he has done, it's infinitely worse than the kid in the scenario. That you and I owe him everything, and to not have responded to him with love, even if we say, well, I'll still do what you say. I'll still follow the golden rule. I'll still try to care for the poor. I'll still try to tell the truth. It doesn't matter. You owe a debt to God that you have not paid and cannot pay and will never be able to pay. Infinitely worse. So what do we do? Let's just, another scenario. Let's say that you owe somebody a ton of money, and you realize you're not going to be able to afford to pay them back. That relationship will be altered and broken unless you're able to pay it. The relationship is broken if you can't pay the debt. The only way that the relationship could be restored is if the person who loaned you the money decides to extend grace and to offer to forgive the debt for free. But if they do that, that means they are taking the hit. They are out that much money. They're absorbing the debt into their bank account. Their bank account gets broken so that the relationship could be restored. The reason why Jesus has to die on a cross is that Jesus is saying, I'm absorbing the debt. I'm paying the debt in your place. So I am willing to be broken so that your relationship with God won't be. I mean, think about how this works with food. Everything that you've ever eaten, maybe not counting salt or some minerals or there's some caveat to this that I'm not thinking of, but almost 99.9% of everything you've ever eaten had to die first in order for you to live. Even you think about a loaf of bread, the grain that provided the flour, it had to die in order for you to live. If it doesn't die, then you will. Meaning, even you think about a loaf of bread, even if it remains whole, if it remains intact, then you starve and die. The only way that you live is if it has to be broken. It breaks so that you might be filled. When Jesus says, I'm the true bread, he's letting you know that on the cross, I am willing to be broken so that you might be whole. I am willing to be emptied so that you might be filled. I'll die so that you might live. This is the kind of love, this is a love that is so wondrous and so generous and so sacrificial. That's what our souls are starving for, to be loved like that. To have someone else look at you and say, I'm willing to do anything for you at ultimate expense for myself, for your sake, just because I'm so crazy about you. That is the thing that our souls are starving for. But you have to receive it. You have to take it in. If you put a plate of bread in front of somebody who is starving, that bread does nothing for them unless they pick it up and take it in. So allow the need of your own starving soul to drive you to Jesus and to feast on him and his love for you over and over and over again until you are satisfied. Consider that an invitation. Let me pray. Father, I pray that you would give us the eyes and the ears and the heart to see and to hear and to believe that we have a great need for a shepherd, and we have a great shepherd for our need.